I'm Josh from Sydney, Australia.
And I'm Frosty from Melbourne, Australia. And you're listening to Call Your Hits, the Storm Riders Airsoft podcast.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. My guests today are Frosty and Josh, as you heard, from Australia. Frosty's an old friend of the show, and along with Josh, they're part of the organizing group for the premier annual Australian Airsoft experience. Airsoft, as you may know, is not legal in Australia, so the Aussies have many groups, including OzOne, which is Josh's group, as well as the Aussie Assassins Milsim and ARC, Frosty's own team, who organize an annual trip to nearby New Zealand to play airsoft for several days in a row. And this year, this event is called Operation Rising Tiger, and it's taking place from the 18th to the 21st of October in Christchurch, New Zealand. And it's going to be 3 full days of play, plus an additional bonus CQB day, I think, at the end, and also extra days organized by AAMS. So it's going to be a very packed week, and I'm excited to hear more about the event this year and how it's building off of the successes from last year at Operation Black Gecko. So, lads, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
So the last time we spoke, we were talking about your last event, Operation Black Gecko, which was rather successful, minus some weather-related issues, if I remember correctly. So what's the deal this year? I know that last time, like we did a bit of an AAR, you guys were talking. You have some ideas on how you were going to build on that this year. So what's the scoop for this year?
So this year we're going to basically design a new rule set that will still be the same missions that we had planned the entire time, including some that we didn't get to do last year. Everything that was within our control went pretty well, but 150-kilometer winds, we didn't actually put in the package that was given to us by Mother Nature herself on the Saturday. But we only lost a few hours play in the long run. I think we had a great Friday and a great Sunday. So we'll be looking to emulate that. There's some things that we didn't get to do on the Saturday that we'll be sort of putting in right up front on the Friday this year. And then the way we draw the missions out will slightly change, which is a brainchild of Frosty, which is, I'm sure, something he'd like to elaborate on as we go through it, without giving too much away, I think. But the idea is the same. So 3 full days of airsoft. We've got people coming from all over the world. There's a surprise contingent this year from Tahiti who reached out to us on the Facebook page. And I was very surprised and very pleased to hear that they'll be sending up to 5 guys. I think it's a contingent of 4 or 5. So they'll have their own squad. I was actually just talking to one of the guys today about how our radios work and what the difference is, because they're all going to be using French radios, which will not work with our radios. So I'm going to set them up with something. Actually, I reached out to Frosty and was like, hey, did your radio work when you went to the US? Because this is something that we've never faced before. It's never been an issue sort of making stuff globally compatible. But it's exciting as well. So we're seeing, more people from all over the world reach out. And yeah, Australia and New Zealand sort of split right down the middle as far as I can see the sign-ups going as well. So plenty of people from around. We've got 3 local teams. So Coast, and the invites have gone out to CSG and TAG. CSG actually shares the field with us. So the field is actually sort of not separated by any fence lines or anything. And we can, and have in the past, it's actually part of our history that we actually started off in that area. We can extend to their side as long as their TLs are all fine with it. It looks like we've worked out that. Just waiting for some paperwork to come through, and hopefully we should extend the field by about another, I'd say 20 to 30%, which will be awesome this year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to take just a brief tangent. So you talk about the New Zealanders and you talk about rosters. I'm just curious right now, how many people does your roster look like? Are you talking about hundreds of players? Like, what's your number? If you're at liberty to say.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem. We actually just had a draw for patches, so that had everyone's list on it, everyone's name on the list rather, and I think we're up to about 80. So I think I have a measure of at least 50 plus being Australians that are coming over.
Mhm.
then some local players, and then some international players as well. International, obviously, being anything outside ANZ. And it's
Gotcha.
10 years this year. So it's kind of a big feat. But we have
Yeah,
had up to about
absolutely.
120 before. So it's not the biggest so far. But I also haven't closed registrations. So
There's
sometimes
still
we find
time.
people sometimes we find people roll in at the last minute. I think
Mhm.
there was one year we had 10 people sign up on the last day or the last week. And I was like, okay, well, I need to fit these guys in the Orbat somewhere.
Yeah.
But we always manage, and it always works out pretty even. Now I've got to even out the teams, and we always try to do an even ratio of player numbers, but also players from Australia and New Zealand to make sure it's not stacked to one side. And that's something that we learned from history because we did have an Australian versus New Zealand style game at one stage, and yeah, we found that it got a lot more competitive because we were
Mhm.
drawing, along country lines. But we also had a whole bunch of Australians that play 4 days a year going up against guys that play every weekend. So
Yeah,
it
exactly.
was it was a bit of a bloodbath as well. And the game had to be skewed so much in our favor to even make it an even playing field.
Right.
But I find that if I just have the same amount of Aussies and Kiwis on each team, that kind of it does that itself, and to the point where we've actually been able to remove the third contingent, which was always the balancing act, and we took the PMCs out and just can just have two forces on each other. There will be a small change to that this year. The guys were who are on the neighboring field, I kind of want to get them really stuck well in the places that they know and in their own turf, and they get some of our more experienced guys to go up and have to get something from the very back of that field, which will be near impossible with the locals all dug in. But I think it'll be a really, really enjoyable time for an hour or so on the Saturday morning.
Gotcha. And I want to talk. This is something Frosty and I have talked about in the past, and I'm going to do a little bit of a segue because last week I was talking to Jono from Special FX in New Zealand, right? And so one of the things that Frosty and I have talked about in the past, and I think we've mentioned as well, is how you're reaching out and working and expanding this event to the community of Kiwis, right? To make sure that it's not just an Aussie event, but like you said, like it's ANZ, right? It's like everyone as much as possible. So what have you firstly have you had any chance to connect with other organizations like John's organization, and so what are the plans to sort of expand yourself into the New Zealand community?
I personally reached out to teams, but I also find individuals come from all sort of walks of life, and on the Kiwi side, and they're connected to us through the shops or the locations that we're at. So Arena, which we have on the Monday, has a lot of players that come through. Some of them are a little young, so they haven't been able to make it into our games. But as they sort of age through, they end up joining up. I think there's a guy who's signed up who will be 18 early October, so he's not eligible for the event just yet. But he will
Mhm.
be next week, and then in 3 weeks we've got the event, so he'll have just made it by 2 weeks, which is
Awesome.
good.
And one of the things we talked about with Jono, because his company is really focused on like adding realism, adding immersion. So I'm curious, and I know Frosty. I mean, we went to Iron Horse for, for whatever that was worth in terms of like the true milsim like missions and stuff, because we didn't get to see a whole lot of that. But how has that informed sort of your mission crafting, I guess, and how has that changed? And what are you doing as well to add to immersion to the event for your players?
That's an excellent question. And we have this balance that we always try and strike between what's going to be really fun and what's going to be really immersive. I've always touted it as a MilSoft event. So it's not quite MilSim in the way that it would be, so being stuck into holes for 3 hours or making sure that you've got just an area of what you don't even know if people are going to be there or not. We try and simulate action as much as possible. So the immersion is definitely all the way down how we design the missions. All the kit this year is like anyone can pick whatever uniform they like. I find this is easier to manage, especially when cost comes into it. I don't want cost being a barrier for anyone to be able to enjoy the events, especially some of the younger guys. But aside from the armbands, everything will be pretty much mil spec all the way through because that's all the stuff that we generally grab. There have been some holes in immersion before, which people have. I've had equal feedback. I've had, it was really fun when this giant thing happened in the middle, but it wasn't super, wasn't super milsim. And I've also had people have been like, I would prefer it if it was like a little more immersive and we didn't have that happen. So I sort of try and strike that balance every year. Make it as easy as possible to enjoy is kind of the key driver there. So as long as everyone can have a good time, unless I get feedback otherwise, we generally go down the same direction each year.
And Frosty, I know Josh mentioned at the start you're making some recommendations to make some changes. There's some stuff that you can say, some stuff that you can say. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what I can and can't say, I don't actually know. I know there's a
Oh,
few things, but
use your judgment, Frosty. This is always
yeah,
fine.
use my judgment. Well, firstly, we're trying to implement some more mission providing mechanics. So last year we had the envelopes, which would be given to squad leads and commanders, and it would have your mission objective. This year, I think what we're settling on is sort of giving each team a deck of playing cards, or at least a suit from a deck, and from ace down to two, we'll have different mission objectives on it, and it's up to the team to sort of divide them throughout the squads to accomplish those missions. And some of them might be time allocated. So, example, Three of Hearts, it might be go to this area and find this loot box. And you could do that any time of the day. You could give it to any squad to go do it, and they can accomplish it. And then in that loot box might be something that's actually beneficial to another objective. You can then have 7 of diamonds, and that's between these hours. You need to be at this location defending this objective. To pair that, the other team will also have their 7 of spades, for example, will be go to this location at this time and take this objective. This is my way of sort of making sure that the objective is very clear. It's not written on the card, or you have it in hand, and any squad can be given to. And then you just got to decide how many people you want to allocate to that objective. Because if I send one squad to defend an area, they might fail because the other team sent 3 squads to take it. But the point of that time allocation in the cards is people need to prioritize what they think might be important. Because I could send 2 squads to defend an area, and the other team might not even come into it for 2 hours straight, which I hope doesn't happen. I know what that feels like now.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just automatic points to the defending team because the other team didn't see it as a valuable card to go after. But yeah, I think the idea of sort of having a deck of cards, almost like a checklist of objectives you can complete throughout the day or over the weekend, is just a very clear way of giving people direction. And then on top of that, we will be throwing in, little side missions like over the radio, things to sort of spice it up a little. But that's sort of the direction we're going.
And just, I mean, this is a bit of a pedantic question, but how do they know what the mission is based on the card?
So
I will have a key for that, right?
Yeah, we'll have a key for that. So it'll be something like you've been given this card, and then there'll be a document or whatever, or maybe we'll take a note from your book and it's a QR code, and that sends us to a website that has, here is your objective. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good idea. Yeah. I really do like that idea, and I might, if you're going to steal my QR code idea, I might pilfer your deck of playing cards idea. So just going to put that in my mind. But that's, I think, it's definitely striking that balance between like letting the teams figure out and prioritize for themselves without leading them. Like, I mean, you're leading them in that you're giving them the objectives, but it's up to them to organize themselves. But also throw in those, those, I think they call them fragos, right? The just the random stuff that you can do to spice it up. Is there anything that you did, or what did you do last year that you're definitely not going to do this year, aside from stop because of a windstorm?
I don't know that there's too many things that we wouldn't do again. The best thing about starting with the Conquest series, where we literally just had people capturing points and letting go of points, and all we had to do was make sure there was an odd number, and then if the deck got stacked, we would have to sort of even that out. Starting so simple meant that we've been able to gradually add more and more things without having to take too much away. I think the only thing that I've really taken away is the PMC, and that doesn't mean that we can't have a third element. It just means that the third element is not, where the game depends to get its balance from. So we're trying to strike that balance somewhere else. In this case, sort of having 13 playing cards, for example, over the weekend. You've got multiple suits for each side. There's our team artist, actually, who we hired to and commissioned to do the artwork for our hoodies the year that we couldn't travel, so COVID. He has a Kickstarter that I've decided to get behind, and luckily it's just come out in time for us to use these battlefield playing cards, and each one of the cards is a different person from like a famous battle in history, which is just super interesting by itself. But using all of those, so going through the early missions and set up stuff as like the 2s and the 3s, you've got command and control, you've got all these things that sort of set the play up, and then as we go through, they get more advanced and they get more. There's a higher chance of interaction there, as opposed to, some of these guys need to actually be learning the field as well. So some of these missions will be, making sure that they can draw a perimeter around what is going to be their half. And we had our invading force win last year, so that's where we got Rising Tiger from. Those guys that were the team Lion has to go and get their position back because they were thrown from their territory last year.
Right. It was interesting as I was looking at the schedule and preparing for the episode, and like looking at the schedule for Rising Tiger. I found it really interesting that there's a slot like on the first day, not the AAMS, but your actual first day. That's like, yes, it's the mandatory briefing, but there's also the training part, right? Which I guess is this I think we talked about this before, but it's some of these players like have probably like this is their first time. They probably have very little experience with airsoft, and so you actually have to dedicate some time to bringing them up to speed on certain things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also we find that they don't have as much gear to like fiddle with and sort of get sort of ready for the full 3 days. They don't have to be out there with all of their kits open. While everyone's doing that, they're kind of twiddling their thumbs or just being like, I don't know what to do. Like they definitely get a chance on the morning of the Friday, which is also when a lot of the Kiwis can't make it because they're still working. And a lot of the experienced players, they used to take the Friday off, which is why I brought the event start to halfway through Friday, so that we would still have everyone come in, because a lot of people were like, if it's just training day, I'm not going to go. It's like, well, that's fine, but it was training day for the guys that are new, and then a couple of skirmish games in the morning to get everyone's sort of trigger fingers nice and worn in. If they just want to have some fun. So sometimes we walk them around the field. We'll often show them the very basics of how to handle the gun safely, what the callouts will be, like how to know when to safety your weapon, when to be clearing, making sure that they've got emergency information. I'll stack a deck for most of those guys to have. That's essentially our entire rule set. Just printed, ready for them to go in a plastic sleeve, so they can have a look, as well as a copy of the map. And be like, all right, guys, we're going to walk from here to the other side. So just so you know, we've gone from this star at the top all the way down to like the fourth point on the map. So they can get an idea of that. Some people have map reading and referencing experience, radio experience. Some people come in with absolutely nothing. And that's where they get the first couple of days before they really need to sort of put any of that stuff into play. Like by the time the Sunday comes around, if they haven't done it before or haven't been trained on it, they've still seen other people do it. They still know what has been a success and what hasn't, whether or not it's important to have a radio on at a certain time, all this sort of thing. But we definitely allocate that time, and also for the huge amount of safety checks that we'll do at the beginning and making sure everyone's gun's fine. Sometimes people think that it's fine, but it's not. And that's just sort of typical for every event.
Yeah.
But those mandatory briefings in the morning are set at that time to make sure that whatever goes on after that, that everyone's been briefed. And if I see people entering after, I'm like, right, you need to be briefed separately. And if I can't do that right now because I'm running the game, you'll have to sit out and wait for that. And that's sort of put all over the rules so that everyone knows that.
Right.
You will miss a period of play if you don't have that safety briefing. But
shocking. Show up on time, guys. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if you have. I mean, you because of the nature of what you do in Australia and New Zealand. In Canada, we call it airsoft standard time,
Yeah.
which is everything starts half an hour after it's supposed to start. I don't know if that's the
Oh
reality that you
yeah.
guys experience.
If we
Yeah.
wanted to start at 10, that's an 8 o'clock briefing, and if it's 8:30 by the time, it's like, guys, it's Josh. Isn't the briefing at 8? And I go, yeah, but do you see how many people are in the car park?
Yeah.
We'll do 8:30, or I'll yell ready 30 at 8 o'clock, which means you've got 30 minutes to be like here, right, ready for the briefing, and people will still be at the very back of the car park by the time I go around. And before I get to the briefing, the last thing I do is walk through the very back of the car park and tell everyone at their cars to be like, get inside, get inside, get inside, get inside.
Hmm.
Because there's nothing worse than having someone go, oh, I didn't know the rules. And it's like, yeah, well, if you went at the briefing and you didn't read the rule set, there's not much more I can do to you. I can't force feed you these information points. But what I can do is make sure that you know them before you go out there. And it just saves so much hassle on the field. Like, there have been years that before we were running it, some briefings were not as clear as they could have been, or there was so much in a briefing that people were just falling asleep by the time it got to the actual important bits. It's like, we run through the important bits at the beginning, we run it through the important bits at the end, and all of the meat in the middle is kind of the stuff that you would want to know. And we try and keep it brief. Plus, most people have done this before. If they haven't played with us before, they've still played airsoft, and if they haven't done either, they're the ones that are really intently listening anyway. So it usually works out.
That's fair. Ben, I know you love working with new players. Do you do any of this training business as well? Like, do you do you show them any drills or any manipulation stuff? I know that.
No, I want to.
No?
I keep telling Josh I might get me and Zen and the rest of my consistent ARC members, and we'll take the new guys out. We'll show them the basics, But it's also time allocation, because if everyone is arriving late and next thing you know the brief is delayed, you lose that time. And that's why I think it's super important to mingle with the players on the field. Because I've learned that every year. I've always had someone asking me for help on something, or they'll come up after and ask about a piece of kit I have. Because everyone's there to learn, That's an experience for everyone to sort of pick up new things that they haven't had prior accessibility to.
Yeah. What are the things that you tend to focus on when you bump into it? Because I guess really you have, like you were saying, you have a lot of people who are just doing this by themselves, but you also have teams. But when it comes to those individuals that maybe it's the first time or one of their first times, what are you focusing on with them?
Well, me being me, I want to make sure that they're just okay in general,
Yeah, okay.
It can be a lot to take in for a lot of people. It's a very surreal experience, especially for a lot of Australians, their first times, because we just don't have anything like it. The closest we have is Jalbor, which is basically exclusive to one state now. So, for example, we have 3 new guys in my team coming this year. And the first day is just them constantly smiling because they're wearing clothes that they've never worn before. They're holding a fake weapon. These are things I've seen on TV and video games. So when I bump into new players on the field, whether they're new to me or they're new to the sport, first thing I'm always doing is checking that they're good and what they're doing. Because a lot of the time they have no direction. And then that's my next purpose now, is to give them direction. Because if they're lost, well, they're useless and they're questioning their fun. And the whole reason we're there is for fun. So if they're questioning their fun, they're going to go somewhere they're not supposed to be. So give them direction, make sure that they're getting the best that they can. That's what I try to do.
Try not to get them to sit around for 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah. I'll just send them into the enemy respawn point.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is that obviously this is the 10th edition, and a lot of things have changed from the first edition to this edition, obviously. But one of the things that has also changed is sort of airsoft technology, right? So you don't, because of the nature of how you play airsoft in Australia, which is to say you do not, you really only have access to your airsoft replicas, let's call it once a year for simplicity's sake, right? Only when you're there. But airsoft technology changes a lot year to year. I think about how the first time I ever played airsoft, HPA did not exist. And now it's ubiquitous. So much so that when we went to AMS Iron Horse, the lineup for HPA was around the block, and I had an AEG and I got chronoed immediately. So technology is changing. Also, how players are playing in terms of heavier weight BBs and all this kind of stuff is also changing. Velocities are by and large sort of steadily sort of increasing over time. How have you adapted your, well, certainly like your safety regulations and stuff like that to this changing technology, but also how have you seen your airsoft community change and adapt and adopt these new technologies?
Yeah, that's really interesting. The first year, so that would have been 2014 that we attended, we were given semi-auto guns that were really easy to obtain because they had only legalized automatic airsoft guns earlier that year. So no one wanted a semi. Everyone wanted to. They tossed those rifles aside and they were like, "No, I want the brand new gear." And months beforehand, they were not playing with any full auto because it wasn't allowed. The guns weren't allowed to operate that way. They had to be they had to be changed before, like as they were coming into the country, before they were sold by the vendors. And I mean, the old guys that helped us start the team way back still have stories of how they started in the bush with springers. Like they were just out there with these spring guns, and they decided to, keep following the sport as it progressed, and that went through to all the different technologies that's changed. But I mean, the first year, I also remember us only buying 0.2 gram BBs. Like that's all
Mm-hmm.
anyone ever used anywhere, right? And now most people are running 2.5s at minimum, and people are going up to 3.8s in all sorts of weaponry rather than just what used to be just the snipers. Um, so we find that as the technology changes, the rules change. Because of an incident that we had last year, we are using full face protection now in the bush, which was never something that was required. I plan on getting multiple complaints about that, which is fine. But considering the change in, BB weight is like a big one. Like the damage that can do now is just a little different, even though the energy is the same. So the way that we change is to make sure that everyone's safe primarily. But yeah, we only get a couple of days. Sometimes people will take an extra week to get all their stuff in order first,
Mm-hmm.
like play with the replicas and stuff. I think that's the one thing that I really miss as an Australian and someone that's not in a state that can, I couldn't even get a gearbox here without
Yeah.
breaking some sort of law. Up in Queensland, where they've got gels, and it's still a huge industry. That industry is younger than this team.
Yeah.
It only kicked off really in 2017, 2018, and we saw it go up like wildfire because everyone started getting behind it. But it also means there are guys in Queensland now that know how to shim gears and do all this stuff that I've never been able to have a chance to do because I've only seen the inside of my guns in the shop when I'm
Mm-hmm.
picking them up or when something needs to be done to them. And by the time enough maintenance has come around, I've just bought a new gun
Yeah.
because it's been 2 or 3 years.
Plus, airsoft teching is overrated, so don't even worry
but
about it.
it looks like it's something that's fun and would be interesting. Like I'm a tech guy myself, right? So I love pulling things apart, putting them back together again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on the internet since I was 11, so there's always sort of like, oh, I just need to find out exactly how this thing works, and it's always more interesting to me. And there's like plenty of people like that in the team,
Mm.
and a lot of people are, it's like a lot of people, especially I think from the gel sides that I see, is that they're half, like they're like half into like making sure that all the kit and weaponry and all of their gear is ready to go, and then they're half all about playing the sport.
Yeah.
It can be just as fun to collect all the stuff that it takes to participate in airsoft as it is, actually participating in the actual games themselves.
I know that's definitely the case for Frosty. He's a bit of a
Yeah.
geardo.
It's just 11 months of buying stuff. That's what I do.
Are you looking at changing your own replicas as well, Frosty? Is that something now that you've
I already
seen sort of
did.
HPA?
I bought two new AEGs, both valued over 1,000 each. I haven't even touched them yet. They've just been
That's
sitting in the box
shocking.
waiting for me. That and
So
then
you're
for the
planning on
team
using
we
both at
bought.
the same time?
Oh yeah, I have two hands. Got two hands, two weapons.
First photo I'm gonna get.
We have we're thankful to have a lot of new players coming this year in my squad, or at least people who don't have access to their own replicas. So yeah, like that's what we're trying to do, especially with Arc, is build a team where we can just sort of share. I mean, we now own 3 MP7s amongst the team. Although I don't want to use the MP7s for outdoor play because they're very short range. But for CQB, like it's a very iconic platform to use, and it's something different to an M4 or an AK. But yeah, no, we'll definitely be sharing the replicas around. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's the benefit of having a team, right? Is that you can what's mine is
Exactly.
yours. That's the reason I made this team in the first place with Pat and Cal. It's like I have stuff, you have stuff. Let's just collectively have things that we can use whenever we want.
Yeah.
Which is paying off dividends now that Pat has a working LMG because it's going to be something, regardless. So thinking back to this event, you have these 80 players. You have, I think you mentioned, maybe misremembering, but about 50 people from Australia. How many of those are like brand new, like have never played airsoft before?
That's a good question. It's actually something that we don't really find out until we get there. So aside from names that I recognize, there have been a couple of years that I've asked if you've participated in an event before when people sign up. But I got rid of that question because it's just sort of like I don't want people having any apprehension about that question or wanting anything except a good experience when they get there, and just sort of stick your hand up if you haven't played before, and we'll go and do some shooting in the bush. Everyone else, get your stuff ready for the game and make sure you all get chronoed before we get set up. And they'll be like, "What's a chrono?" And then I'll see the guys in the corner like getting all their guns checked.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't had any inquiries for rentals, so it means that most people either have been able to work out gear with people that have brought them into the sport. I know Frosty's probably responsible for about 10 people that
Oh,
have
at
all
least
come in.
10%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. And the same with storage. Like some people are like, "Oh, where do you even store this stuff?" And it's like, look, all the stores will let you do it, but most people just leave it with a friend, or, I encourage Vic, who I leave my gear with, to just use it all year, like
Yeah.
all of it. Like use
Yeah.
all my stuff. Like I don't mind. It's otherwise it literally just sits in a trunk for 360 days,
Yeah.
which seems just a little unfair.
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, I'm always surprised is not the right word, but it's a crazy dynamic. How do you work with the stores and stuff like that to ensure that the new players do know about what's available to them and like what they can use, and as well set the right expectation with the beginners in terms of what kind of money you're going to have to set aside if this is something you want to get into. Like, how do you do? Because like I know for us it's very easy. We can just say, hey, if you go to Frontline, you can buy this gun. It's going to cost you $200, and you buy some BBs. And you're good. For you, it's more complicated than that. How do you communicate that with your newer players, especially?
So it's just clear that when you sign up that there's not a gun included, and that's usually enough for people to go, "Oh, I need to reach out to the team," or like however they found us, they can generally find the information that we post up. Most of that is there are two shops here. There are two shops, so they know who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's an influx of a bunch of us all going in to either pick up stuff or buy new stuff or just look at the guns. Like that's one of my favorite days every year is the first trip to the first store and just been like, give me that. I want to have a look at that. All right, cool. This is cool. This is really cool. And just like it sort of never really gets old because every time you walk into a place with, I remember the first store, which was just so small, and now they've got this giant indoor place with guns all over the walls, and they're celebrating 10 years this year as well, which is wild because they've been around as long as we have, except we've been there 4 days a year, and they've been operating every day since then.
And
But
it's like Christmas for these stores. When we rock up,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
actually just their money day. We come in and they go, "Here's all the new stuff you've missed out on. What do you want to buy?" And we
Mm-hmm.
always buy. It happens every year. It is their Christmas, in my opinion.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
ask for very little from the stores, so it's literally just awareness. And I have at least one contact at each. And for the benefit of the guys, one of the stores will bring out like a shop on wheels that basically sort of sits at base camp. If someone's like, "Oh no, I didn't get gas. I didn't know I needed green gas for this," like there's tins of green gas over there. I mean, people would help you out even if there was, not that kind of facility
Right.
available. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's only available in peak or but I mean, there's always people that are willing and able to help out. And one of the greatest things about having the pre games, which most people are welcome to all of them. There are some closed and some open, but the open ones everyone can come to. The closed ones are actually usually made for those beginner players, and they've been brought over and communicated with AMS, set up for brand new players, and they've gone, look, this is how it works. Go and shoot that tree in the bush. Now you know what you're doing. They'll go through the stores. We'll go through the stores. But I have put up for I think a couple of years in a row gun rental as a product, and no one bought it because people were able to sort it out, which is good. Because it means less, head work for me. And we've gone from doing accommodation, food, transport to just doing the game, which is better for me. And it's also, it means that everyone can get exactly what they want out of the experience each time and allows a little bit more freedom. So unless we're camping on field or staying on field, that's something that we don't have to worry about offering, which is good because it means that people get what they want. Like if they can go into a store and go, hey, I want to rent this. What rentals do you have? They get the full selection as opposed to whatever we would be able to offer without being there, without being able to check on them and see what is available and what's not, what the capacity is. The stores will know all that sort of stuff. And Unlimited Airsoft, shout out to them for, that's the 10 years that we've had alongside them and Arena as well, who have been great. But they definitely enjoy when we wander into town, which our wallets full.
It sounds like a payday for them. I want to zone in on the 10 years. I want to come back to Rising Tiger in a bit, but I wanted to zone in on the 10 years because as we were sort of getting ready to record and stuff, I mean, Josh, you and I had a quick conversation, but 10 years in airsoft is, if for in a lot of ways, is a transitionary sort of hobby, right? People come in, come out. So when you look at the 10 years, some of the people who are going to be with you are people who've been with you along the ride. Then maybe you're missing some people and you're also adding some more new people. What is that looking like for you this year? Because I know you do a big team supper at the end of the events. And what is that shaping up to look like for you?
Yeah, look, this is it's a big year for us, but it's not one of our biggest years. So the world pressures that are on at the moment, the way that the sort of cost of living is kind of affecting literally everyone, no one can ignore it, means that some people can't make it that would probably want to be there. We've tried to cut it down and manipulate the cost as much as we can to allow for that. But the long and short of it is some people aren't going to be able to fly out for a weekend just to enjoy a hobby that they've been able to come to. They also probably have the security of knowing that we'll do it every year. So if, they miss a year, that's not so much of a big deal. But I would say of everyone that's come, at least 75% have come back again or have just stayed with us the entire time all the way through. Then there's the famous faces, which you could probably almost make an entire card deck out of if you just went around the team and had a look at everyone. But yeah, it's and that's the thing. It's become this, these guys are like a family that I get to visit once every 360 days. The famous faces are there every year, and that's awesome. And if anyone's missing, you feel it. You do feel it. And I guess how it's changed from 2 people to up to 121 year, and to the 70 or 80 that we're looking at now. That's probably going to blow out to about 90. So just under 100 players is not bad. And we're getting more and more locals, which is good. I've actually tried to get the locals involved more and more. But they do have every weekend to do whatever they like on the field, and may not want to participate in such a big event, which is totally fine as well.
Any notable absences this year that you're looking forward to get back next year?
Yeah, definitely Koala.
Yeah,
Koala is like the spirit of the team. My unofficial official PR rep, and the guy who does all the videos when something important needs to be said on the Facebook page. He closed us off for COVID, and then he opened us back up again after, both with a beer in hand, which was great because he's probably the most Australian person on the planet. And I definitely don't see anyone else being more Australian.
You're kind of pigeonholed, right?
Yeah, that's a story I'll have to tell you when I see you again. That's a long one. That's a little longer one. But yeah, and Shogun isn't going to be by this year. He's one of the reps for one of the stores, but also one of our oldest players. He was the first of the players to rock up with all the gear and no idea, as far as I can remember, from the North Island, wrong island, wrong island, incorrect island for what we were doing, and rocked up in like, I think there was two of them, and they probably had 12 grand worth of kit altogether. They had about 6K each on them. And I was like, these guys are kitted out. What is going on? I thought they were like pros that had come around and it was their first time as well. It's like, oh, wow, this is great. And that was probably like our second or third year, which was great because, out of 25 people, when you see two guys that literally look like they've just walked off a C-130, you're like, I don't know. I don't know who these guys are, but this is kind of it's cool how far you can take the sport if you really want to.
Like that's a common thing I think with Oz One, especially now, is guys rocking up never even held a replica before in full kit. I mean, like I was the same, and I imagine that's not something you get in a lot of airsoft circles. Obviously, we've seen that recently on the Discord, with people spending all their money on everything and hasn't even gone to the field yet. But that's just how we roll. And obviously, if it's not for you, that's upset. But I have found with our players, it's very much if you're going to invest, you kind of already know it's for you. And then when you get here and realize that you have made a huge investment and it pays off, that is a very enlightening experience, in my opinion.
Right. So, lastly, I want to come back to Rising Tire because we talked about just briefly sort of expanding the play area with one of the other local areas. One of the things that I've read is that there's an island involved somehow.
That's the name of the place.
Oh, is that
the place
it?
is
Yeah,
McLean's Island. Yeah.
Okay, I
So
get it.
it's like the area. It actually used to be an island, and then there's a long story. I'll give you some links actually, and make sure that Frosty gets those as well. Because if you look at them, there's some really great satellite imagery available for that region, and we've actually been able to use some. So it's like probably 4 times sharper than Google Maps. It gets right down to like the individual rusty barrel of what we can see on the field. So we got really lucky actually, because whenever I wanted to draw a map of the field, I just go and get the newest satellite data, and I can see like where the rocks have moved. It's so ridiculously accurate with the imaging there. But it's McLean's Island's the entire area of where all that recreation stuff is. There's a wildlife park out there. There's equestrian across the road. There's like a police training ground on the other corner. There's actually, we're talking about immersion, we back on to a shotgun range. So there's clay shooting right behind us. So on a Saturday, you're going down and you just hear bang, bang. And you're like, oh, this is really immersive.
That would be
definitely doesn't do us any. It doesn't do us any trouble. It's fantastic.
The American Globemasters flying over occasionally.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. You feel like you're in a game some days, and that's just the bottom of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Last stop before Antarctica that actually has any space for that kind of stuff.
Have you given any thought to adding other elements of realism? So I'm thinking about getting to like Jono special effects, like their events, like I think it's Iron Fury, if I remember correctly.
Armored Fury.
Armored Fury, thank you.
Yeah.
Where they're they're including it's wild, like vehicles and tanks, but also like arty sims and like pyrotechnic and like all this kind of stuff. Is there an appetite for the Aussie crew to go that far with the sort of immersion and experience? And or like, do you think that the people who, especially the newer people, would be open to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's something that we can revisit. We did pyro every year for the first years when we weren't organizing the events completely ourselves. So we were organizing the team and our contingent, but we were attending another organization's events. They've now sort of folded in, but we have taken control from about 2018 onwards.
Yeah.
And before that, they had someone who was pyro trained, and we thought we were going to have someone who was able to do that again as time went by, but we've lost that connection, unfortunately. Also, the cost goes up a lot, and it's already sort of prohibitively expensive to just come over for a wander. But we have done things like, jump out of helicopters and run tanks and run jeeps and pyro all over, especially when we had 48 hours on field and we were like sleeping in shipping containers, they would wake us up with pyro and gas cannons in the middle of the night. And that was super immersive. That was probably some of the more fun stuff. While we organize it ourselves and don't have those connections still, it's something we can revisit. It's just going to become, more expensive, and whether or not that's if we're struggling to make sure that our guys come back with what we've got, we would need to find a way of making that super cost effective. But if I can do that, I'm definitely open to running more vehicles, running pyro, making sure we've got whatever we can use on field to make it more interesting. I mean, sometimes we just run civilian vehicles on field. Make sure that obviously no one's shooting those. I want my deposit back. But so that they can do stuff like a vehicle stop, or so they can do stuff like, sweeping the road, making sure they've got a perimeter check, preventing people from going down a certain pathway or whatever. Or also just sort of running people to a bit to drop them off to make sure that they don't have to walk for an extra 15 minutes, because we really want sort of a battle to go out there. If guys are coming back and they're like, oh, I needed to get my BBs, and it's like, right, get in the truck. I'm going to drop you back off right where you left, because I want you back in the fight, because you've got, these 3 days and that's it, to get the most out of it while we're out there. But yeah, it's interesting what we can and can't do on different spots of land as well. We have a little bit more freedom when it's our area that we deal with the leaseholder directly. But there's also a whole bunch of rules that we need to apply to our team members, which will be in the briefings for CSG areas, because I think they're only a few years into having that land and what they can do on it, which is also shared by it's owned by the people of Canterbury. So it's all land that has various uses, but also you need permissions to do certain things. And there's a push away from being able to do these kinds of things, but they've gotten clearance to do it. So obviously they're still allowing people to get into the industry and take that up. And next year there's a chance that we'll have a new field, or we'll have multiple options, so we can run an event at different fields. So a field that we've always had, and then a new field on another day, or we can mix it up a little bit. So it's been similar for a few years, but that's been fantastic at allowing us the stability to see what we can and can't do with these. But yeah, we would need someone sort of pyro trained that drives my insurance up. That means that all these things need to be checked off in different ways. But if we could operate safely and we would do it, it's definitely something we'd go back to for sure.
So this is a question now for both of you, and without sort of, again, giving too much away. I know that, what you're definitely looking forward to is, getting back together with your mates and like all this kind of stuff we talked about. But with respect to Rising Tigers specifically, what is the thing that you are most looking forward to, either from a gameplay standpoint, or like maybe that has you sort of cackling maniacally internally about what you've sort of planned or what have you? Like, what's the thing that you're really looking forward to see how it shakes out this year?
Frosty?
I mean, I guess we'll see how the new objective mechanics go. I haven't really thought about it, honestly. I'm just sort of excited to be there. Because at the end of the day, it is just hanging out with buddies. Yeah. But it's, I don't know. It's I'm excited to see how I perform, how other people perform, see what new kit people have. So as for gameplay, it's whatever. I'm there for action, and if there's no action, well then I don't know. Maybe I got to figure out what sports I'm actually into. But
so is there something that you've thought about? Because I think about how I design games, and like sometimes I create objectives and I'm like, I can't wait to see what they do with this. Like when we give them this, I can't wait to see what happens with their brain. Right. And just as a quick example, one time we had some guy walking around the field with a case that was written TNT on it. Right. And I'm like, I can't wait to see what players make of that. And what they ended up making was asking me, the admin, they're like, hey, there's a guy walking around with a case of TNT. Do I need to do anything with that? And I was like, I don't know. What do you think you should do? Right. Like that was their reaction. And I was like, I knew that something weird was going to happen. So like, is there anything like that you've considered? You don't have to disclose the specifics of it, but
well, have we got are the bombs in play? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so we've got some guys bringing Arduinos with various coding. I don't know what we're up to on that, but I know that I had to give out measurements for a container for a piece of Perspex that's going over one of the black containers that I've got here. That'll definitely go in the bush and be one of the objectives that will probably be available to both teams at different times. I think we've only got one. If we've got more, that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, I'm super keen to throw some wildcards in there as well. So if for whatever reason everyone's got missions and they're all being completed at a timely manner without too much engagement, I'm shuffling the deck and we're starting to throw more cards in there. The benefit of having 52 cards with missions, which I've already written out and we can swap and change as much as we like, is that we've got a big pool of ideas and then we just need to grab from that bucket what we want and then make sure that it's in play, as well as some stuff that we didn't get to do last year, which is I can't give too much away, but we'll probably talk about it after. But there was one mission that was slated for the Saturday that only really worked in that afternoon time slot that we didn't get to do because it was great for just after we do the ball sport thing where you just switch sides. So it was right after switching sides, and it was like, well, you know the other side because you've just played there. You know this side because you're now here. And then everyone has to go and do this one objective, which is sort of like along a pathway without giving too much away. I can't really say anymore, otherwise I'll give it away. But I can't wait to see how everyone responds to this because it's going to be super interesting. People are going to have to use their brains a little bit. And minimal props, multiple ideas. So it's not going to be something that's super high tech. The bombs and stuff will be fantastic, but this idea is literally just the way that it's designed, the way that Candy and I came up with it. Yeah, I'm really keen to see how everyone plays that through, and we'll have to bring Frosty in on it because he's going to be on that team with the guys going against Candy. So I've got two admins fighting each other, which will be amazing.
Perfect.
That's going to be the most fun that I can have from an admin desk. But yeah, I'm really keen to see how people operate with these missions as well. We're still toying with the ideas of like temporary respawns being a wild card that you can throw in, just sort of throw up that almost like a frisbee catcher somewhere, and it's like, look, from there you guys can respawn. It's only there for 20 minutes. It'll be gone after that. But if that means that one team's getting absolutely slaughtered and they have to go and walk all the way back for 10 minutes and then come back in, I'll be like, right, do this really easy mission or do this something simple that gets you behind enemy lines, grab something, bring it back to me, and then I'll give you this 20 minutes or half an hour of like a little power up, like aid stations and stuff as well, all things that we can sort of throw in there. But I really want to see how these missions play out and what we need to do, because if this is all great idea in theory, but we haven't done it before. So if it doesn't work, we're going to have to start throwing some old school tactics in there to get the games going, and then see how we can do that better. But the theme of the game, I think, should be really enjoyable for everyone, and who doesn't like a deck of playing cards?
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, you looked like you were going to say something.
No, I thought you were going to say something. No, yeah, exciting. I love props. I love mechanics. If we have both of them going, like, what's not to have for fun? But yeah, I think part of missions too is having an element that makes it memorable. That's for sure. Like every one of my memories, or most of them, has had some sort of element. Like my first year, we had a access to a field that we called Bunker or World War II, and it was just trenches. And me and three other guys were stuck in this tiny little room of a trench, surrounded. We had three guys on the little divots shooting out. We had the back door closed. I didn't even have my gun on me because I was in the middle of eating when we got attacked. But I was the medic, so I could just keep reviving the guys in the bunker. Having that little room to sit in was a memorable moment. Last year we had these red boxes as props. It was just a box, but it was cool. It was different, It wasn't grass, which is what we're surrounded by. I think having something to point your brain towards remember when we did this and we had that. Like this year, I want a canine element, so I want to get a giant stuffed dog as a plush toy, and then if that goes according to plan, people go, "Remember that canine mission?" And people go, "You had a dog on
Yeah,
the field?"
exactly.
Like, no, not a real dog, but yeah. And then of course the dog will get a name, and then it will take on its own life of its own. Yeah, that's how the stories are made. That's what brings people back. Go, hey, where's the dog? Like, oh, yeah, he's around here somewhere.
Yeah, we don't talk about the dog though. Remember, Frosty. Well, guys, I'm really looking forward to seeing how all this plays out for you. I think that you mentioned that, well, if it doesn't go to plan, like, we got some, but I mean, you've put so much time and effort, and you understand your community and the sport so well that I would be shocked if it didn't work out the way that you intended to, just by virtue of the fact that it's well thought out. And I think it's a great idea. I'm really looking forward to seeing how your players interact with that, how it works out. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again to do a debrief, to hear about all the secret missions that I couldn't hear about this time, because you don't want to spoil it, which is fair. I hope you guys have a tremendous event. I hope the turnout does indeed cross that 90 threshold for you by the time the event rolls around. So thank you both for being here today and talking to me about Operation Rising Tiger and Oz One. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on.
Thanks so much, Phil. It's been awesome to be here.
Yeah, always good to talk.
And thanks for listening, everyone. That's all we've got for you this week. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.